She actually wore it, Mark laughed, as I stared down at the bright blue shirt. Chief Financial Officer, my gift, my humiliation. The whole family cackled while I stood there, 45, reliable, invisible, and watched my brother reduce decades of sacrifice to a punchline. But the second betrayal hit harder. Behind that joke, he'd secretly named himself executor. And he wasn't just mocking me, he was stealing from Dad's estate. Everyone was, too charmed to notice. Everyone but me. I smiled, pulled the shirt on, and took my front row seat. He had no idea what I'd found in Dad's old ledgers, no idea what I was about to expose. My name is Sarah Hawkins, and I'm 45 years old. I spend my days balancing family checkbooks, organizing holidays, and until last spring, I nursed my father through his final months. The familiar scent of lemon oil rises from my kitchen table, where my planner lies open, each line filled with neat blue ink. My younger brother Mark, always the family charmer, swaggers through life expecting applause for his quick jokes and quicker shortcuts. Father understood my careful nature. He taught me proper ledger keeping with his fountain pen when I was 12, and I've maintained those paper records even as everyone else went digital. These days, I fight a quiet battle between keeping peace and earning real respect. But let me start from the beginning. I pulled into the Lakeview Lodge just as the string lights flickered to life against the darkening sky. The whole family was already there. You could hear the laughter echoing across the parking lot, mixing with the splash of kids tossing stones into the water. My stomach tightened as I grabbed my purse and the folder of documents I'd promised to bring. You know that feeling when you're walking into a room and everyone's already settled in? That's how it felt stepping onto the lodge's wraparound porch. Mark spotted me first, his designer polo practically glowing under the patio lights. "There's our numbers, girl," he called out, waving me over with that trademark grin of his. I hadn't even set my things down when he started herding everyone into a circle. "Come on, folks, gathering time." The wooden floorboards creaked under the shuffle of feet. I caught glimpses of the setup inside through the window. Paper plates stacked near the buffet, Mark's laptop connected to the projector he'd been fussing with earlier. The screen showed his presentation title, Legacy, Liquidity, and Love. Classic Mark, always going for the dramatic touch. "Special presentation first," Mark announced, producing a gift-wrapped box with a flourish. "For our very own financial wizard." He held it out to me, and I could feel everyone's eyes following the motion. The paper crinkled under my fingers as I carefully undid the bow. Remember those moments when you know something's off, but social pressure keeps your hands moving anyway? Inside was a folded t-shirt, bright blue cotton. I lifted it up, and there it was in bold letters, Chief Financial Officer. The laughter started before I could even process it fully. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mark's voice cut through the chuckles, "I present our CFO, Chief Family Officer. Nobody keeps us broke, but balanced, quite like Sarah." More laughter rippled through the crowd. Cousin Brenda's camera clicked rapidly, capturing my forced smile from multiple angles. The cotton felt scratchy against my palms as I smoothed the shirt's hem. "Thanks, Mark," I managed, keeping my voice steady. "Very creative." I could already picture these photos circulating. In the family group chat, Sarah, the perpetual punchline. "Remember those old Polaroids Dad used to take where you'd have to wait for the image to develop? Sometimes I wish people's true colors showed up that clearly, developing right before your eyes. You'd think after 4 decades of being the responsible one, the one who tracked every medical bill during Dad's final year, the one who could recite insurance policy numbers from memory, I'd be immune to this sort of thing. But standing there, holding that shirt, while everyone laughed at Mark's joke, I felt 12 years old again, the serious sister who couldn't take a joke. The projector hummed to life inside, reminding me why we were really here. Dad's estate presentation would follow dessert, and that's what mattered, not this circus act of Mark's. I did something then that probably surprised him. I unfolded the shirt completely, pulled it on over my blouse, and smoothed it down. The laughter stuttered a bit. See, that's the thing about bullies, even the family variety. They don't quite know what to do when you embrace their attempt at humiliation. Looking around the room, I took mental inventory like Dad taught me. 3 coolers against the wall, probably full of Mark's imported beer. A stack of manila envelopes near his laptop, the estate documents we'd be reviewing later. The projector casting that self-important title across the screen. Legacy, Liquidity, and Love. The crowd had already started drifting toward him, drawn by his gravitational pull like always. But Dad used to tell me something when we'd work on those leather-bound ledgers together. Numbers never lie, only people do. I straightened my shoulders under the silly shirt. Evening was falling faster now, the patio lights burning brighter against the darkness, and somewhere in that stack of documents, the truth was waiting. Taking the front row seat felt like muscle memory. Just like those endless school assemblies where the quiet kids got pushed forward while the cool crowd claimed the back. The fabric of the CFO shirt still itched against my skin as Mark stepped up to the projector, remote in hand. "Family," he started, his voice carrying that boardroom polish he'd perfected over years of sales pitches. "As executor of Dad's estate." Wait, executor? My pen froze mid-stroke in my planner. That couldn't be right. Dad had always said, and with Attorney Carlson's full support, we're implementing a streamlined probate process. Mark clicked to his next slide, all crisp graphics and corporate fonts. We're expediting the paperwork for everyone's benefit. Less red tape means faster resolution. You know that moment when something feels wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it? Like when you're counting change and the numbers don't add up? That's how my stomach felt as Mark breezed through his presentation. I could almost hear Dad's voice. "Devil's in the details, Sarah. Always check your work twice." Slide 6 popped up, and my chest tightened. The numbers were dancing in front of me, but not in a good way. Dad's last email. I remember it clearly because it arrived on Valentine's Day. Had listed completely different balances. I'd printed that email, filed it away in my family finances folder, right next to the birthday card where he'd written, "Trust your instincts, they're sharper than you think." Then I saw it. An escrow entry labeled wrong, the kind of mistake Dad would have caught in seconds. And right below it, a line item that made my accountant's heart skip. Miscellaneous disbursement. Dad's golden rule echoed in my head. There's no such thing as miscellaneous in accounting. Every penny needs a proper name. The room had that drowsy after-dinner feel as Mark wrapped up. People were already reaching for their phones, probably planning to post happy family reunion photos. I raised my hand. Felt like I was back in high school, but some habits die hard. "About that escrow line on slide 6, I said, keeping my voice level. "The allocation seems off compared to February's numbers." Mark's smile didn't waver, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Just standard adjustments, sis. Nothing to worry your CFO head about." A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. Easy laughs, the kind that dismiss questions without answering them. "But the miscellaneous disbursement," I started. "Sarah," he only used my full name when he wanted to shut something down, "everything's been reviewed and approved." Attorney Carlson himself signed off on the workflow. I felt the room shift, that subtle change in air pressure when people start getting uncomfortable. Aunt Linda coughed. Cousin Brenda suddenly found her phone fascinating. You could practically hear the collective thought, "Why is Sarah making trouble again?" Then came the kicker. "Of course," Mark added, all smooth confidence. "Once probate closes in 30 days, everything locks in place. Clean and simple, just how Dad would have wanted it. 30 days. My pen moved automatically, circling today's date in my planner and counting forward. The countdown started ticking in my head like one of those kitchen timers Dad used to set for his famous sourdough bread. 30 days to figure out what wasn't adding up. The presentation wrapped up in a flutter of questions about vacation homes and heirloom jewelry. The shiny stuff that always distracted people from the fundamentals. Mark stood by the projector, posing for photos with that 1,000-watt smile of his. You know how stage magicians always direct your attention exactly where they want it? That's what his charm was. A curtain, bright and dazzling, designed to keep everyone looking away from what really mattered. I stayed in my front row seat, running my fingers over the numbers I'd jotted down. The CFO shirt didn't itch anymore. I had bigger things to worry about than Mark's idea of a joke. 30 days. The timer was running. I slipped into Dad's study just after midnight. The lake house was quiet, except for distant laughter from the rental cabins where most of the family was staying. Mom's rules about the probate lockbox meant the main house was off limits to everyone else, a small mercy tonight. You ever notice how memories hit harder in the dark? The leather of Dad's desk chair still smelled like his aftershave. The brass lamp cast that same warm circle he'd worked under for 30 years. I could almost see him there, head bent over his ledgers, teaching me the satisfaction of balanced books. "Let's see what you've been up to, Mark," I muttered, spreading duplicate statements across the mahogany surface. The desk lamp illuminated each page like a specimen under a microscope. Bank PDFs on my laptop glowed next to their printed cousins, and I started matching dates, amounts, account numbers. Red circles bloomed as I worked. A transfer here, an adjustment there, small enough to slide past casual inspection, but they added up. Dad's voice echoed in my head. "Pennies make dollars, sugar. Mind the small stuff." Then I saw it. The consent forms authorizing Mark's executor status had Dad's signature, but something was off. I grabbed my phone's flashlight for a closer look. Dad's capital H in Hawkins always had this distinctive loop, a habit from his drafting days. These signatures were missing that flourish. My hands shook as I dug through my accordion file for comparison. Found it. Dad's last birthday check to me, written 3 months before he passed. I took photos of both signatures, loaded them into my phone's photo editor, and overlaid them. The forgery was good, I'll give Mark that much, but the tilt was wrong, like someone trying too hard to be casual. Dad's real signature leaned exactly 12 degrees right, another drafting habit. These executor signatures tilted left. From somewhere outside, Mark's laugh carried across the water. That same laugh from the reunion, when he'd handed me that stupid shirt. My cheeks burned again, but this time the heat felt different, focused. You know how a magnifying glass can turn sunlight into fire? That's what this humiliation was becoming, a lens concentrating everything into a single, sharp point. I grabbed a legal pad and started listing tasks. The numbers needed witnesses. Dad taught me that. One set of eyes could miss things, but 2 sets rarely failed. I scanned everything, the forged signatures, the mismatched statements, my handwritten notes. The thumb drive's LED blinked as files copied over. Made 2 backup copies, one for my home safe, one for my office. Dad's other lesson: paper burns, computers crash, but redundancy saves. The desk drawer slid open with that familiar squeak as I tucked the drive inside. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. I froze, breath caught in my throat. But it was just the house settling. These old lake places always talk to themselves at night. Still, time to wrap up. I gathered my papers, straightened Dad's blotter like I'd found it. Standing in the doorway, I touched the old brass doorknob, the one with that small dent where I'd banged my toy truck, age 6. "I won't blink first," I whispered to the empty room. Not this time. Not with Dad's legacy on the line. The door clicked shut behind me, and I held my files close. Somewhere out there, Mark was probably still laughing, thinking he'd won with his little CFO joke. But Dad had another saying: numbers don't care about charm. And these numbers? They were starting to tell one hell of a story. Morning light streamed through Attorney Jensen's floor-to-ceiling windows, making the conference room feel more like an aquarium. Her assistant had brought coffee in real mugs. None of those paper cups you get at cheaper firms. Should have warned me about the prices right there. You know that moment when you're about to spend money you don't have? Your hand gets all floaty, like it's trying to pull back from the check you're writing. That's how I felt, sliding my folder across that gleaming table. "These are concerning discrepancies," Jensen said, tapping her Mont Blanc pen against the signature comparisons. She had that polished look I used to envy at PTA meetings, tailored blazer, pearls that probably cost more than my car, especially given the compressed timeline. My calendar app chimed right then. 29 days until probate closed. The sound made me jump, coffee sloshing against white ceramic. Our retainer for cases like this starts at $15,000, Jensen continued, sliding a contract toward me. Given the urgency, we'll need to move quickly. $15,000. That was most of my emergency fund, the one Dad always insisted I maintain. A storm fund, he'd called it. Well, the storm was here. I signed. The pen felt heavy, but my hand was steady. For about 3 hours, I actually felt lighter, like maybe the universe was finally balancing its books. Then Jensen's paralegal called. Ms. Hawkins, I regret to inform you that our firm must withdraw representation due to an unforeseen conflict of interest. Her voice had that practiced smoothness of someone delivering bad news on script. Your retainer will be refunded in full within 3 business days. I heard what she wasn't saying. Heard Mark's voice, probably over drinks at the country club where he'd been cultivating judges and lawyers for years. The same voice that had introduced me as the family's CFO while everyone laughed. The voided engagement letter sat on my kitchen table like a dead thing. I stared at Jensen's signature, now crossed through with a neat red line. Another door closed. Another professional telling me, in the politest possible way, that I wasn't worth the risk. Maybe I needed a character witness, someone to vouch for my stability, my credibility. Cousin Brenda came to mind. We'd been close once before Mark's orbit pulled her away. I found her number and pressed dial before I could talk myself out of it. Sarah? She sounded distracted. Kids yelling in the background. Everything okay? Mark mentioned you've been upset about the estate. Stuff. Of course he had. Brenda, I need your help. There are some irregularities in Dad's paperwork and Are you sure? She cut in. The background noise faded, like she'd moved to another room. I mean, Mark showed us all the documents at the reunion. Everything looked pretty straightforward. My throat tightened. The signatures, Brenda, they're not... Look, Sarah, that gentle tone people use with difficult relatives. I know you're having a hard time with all this, but maybe you're seeing things that aren't there. Mark's been working so hard to make this smooth for everyone. I set the phone down before she could say more. Didn't hang up. Dad taught me that was rude. Just set it down and walked away. Her voice became a tiny thing, calling my name from the speaker. The CFO shirt was still draped over my kitchen chair where I'd tossed it after the reunion. The letters seemed to mock me now, black on white like a prison uniform. Tears pressed hot behind my eyes, but I blinked them back. Crying wouldn't balance any books. Instead, I opened my laptop. Created a new spreadsheet tab. Next steps. The cursor blinked in the first cell, patient as Dad's ledgers. The doorbell rang just as the sun was setting. That particular golden light that made the lake look like hammered copper was streaming through my windows. By the time I reached the front door, there were only footsteps fading down my porch steps, quick and light, like someone running from their own decision. My hands shook as I lifted the cardboard box from the porch. It wasn't heavy, maybe 5 pounds, but the familiar handwriting on the lid made my heart stutter. Aunt Linda's precise cursive. From your father's desk, trust the ink. You know those moments when the world seems to hold its breath? This was one of those. I set it on my kitchen table, right where Dad used to spread his papers every Sunday afternoon. The same spot where he'd taught me double-entry bookkeeping when I was 12, using colored pencils to make it less daunting. The box smelled of paper dust and cedar, like opening his desk drawer used to. Inside, 3 leather-bound ledgers nested in tissue paper. The covers were worn smooth at the corners and sticky. Notes peeked out like autumn leaves between pages. Dad's system, yellow for questions, blue for follow-ups, green for completed items. My throat tightened at the sight of his careful color coding. I opened the most recent volume to February, his last complete month. The pages whispered against each other, heavy with his presence. Every column was ruled in pencil first, then inked over. Every number had its tick mark, its cross-reference. Dad's handwriting marched across the pages in steady rows, each date noted in the margin. Then I saw it. The escrow balance from slide 6, Mark's streamlined version. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the photo I'd taken of his presentation. The numbers didn't match, not even close. This wasn't a typo or a decimal point error. The difference was 6 figures, clean and cruel as a paper cut. "Check the back," Dad always said. "Important things hide in plain sight." I flipped to the final pages, where a folded note slipped into my lap. The paper was heavier than the ledger pages, almost like cardstock. My name was written on the outside in Dad's hand, with his initials below it. Inside, his writing looked different, slower, more deliberate, like he'd had to focus on each word. "For Sarah's future stability. The numbers tell their own story. You've always known how to listen." The last sentence wavered a bit, as if his hand had been tired, or maybe it was just my vision blurring. I ran my fingers over the words, feeling the slight indentation of his pen strokes. Dad was old school. He believed in paper trails. "Digital is convenient," he used to say, "but paper has memory. Can't hack paper." Now I understood why he'd kept these ledgers parallel to the computer records. He wasn't just being cautious. He was leaving breadcrumbs. Evidence. My hands had stopped shaking. I reached for my phone again, this time to dial Aunt Linda. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. "I thought you might need the truth," she said, before I could speak. Her voice was steady, matter of fact. The same voice she'd used when she taught me to drive stick shift, calm in the face of grinding gears. "How long have you had these?" I asked. "Since the day after." A pause. "He asked me to wait until you needed them. Said you'd know when that was." The ledger lay open on my table, Dad's neat columns like a map waiting to be followed. I could see the path now. Authenticate these records, file for a special hearing, beat the probate clock. "Thank you," I said, meaning more than the delivery. "Sarah," Linda's voice softened, "your father knew exactly what he was doing. With the ledgers. With you." I looked at the note again, at that last, wavering line. Dad had known I'd find my way here, not because I was the family bookkeeper, but because I was his daughter, because I'd learned to trust ink and paper, dates and details. The numbers were telling their story, and I was finally ready to listen. I've always found mornings have their own kind of clarity. Maybe it's the way sunlight hits clean paper, making everything seem possible. Or maybe it's just that first cup of coffee doing its job. Either way, by 8 a.m. the next morning, I was parked outside Notary Services, clutching Dad's ledgers like they were made of gold. The weight of them in my arms brought back Sunday afternoons watching him work, the scratch of his pen marking time like a metronome. "Morning, Mrs. Hawkins," Carol Chen said, adjusting her glasses. She'd notarized everything from Mom's cookie sale permits to Dad's hospital forms over the years. "What can we authenticate today?" I spread the ledgers on her desk. "I need these verified, particularly the handwriting and dates." "You ever notice how professionals have this way of shifting gears?" Carol's friendly smile didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. She pulled on white cotton gloves, handling each page with the care of an archaeologist. "These are remarkably consistent," she murmured, comparing entries. "Your father's penmanship was distinctive. See? How the H in Hawkins always has that extra loop." While Carol worked, I called Linda's church. Their archivist, Mr. Peterson, remembered Dad's meticulous quarterly reports from the Building Fund Committee. "Still have everyone," he said. "Would a formal letter about his documentation style help?" By noon, I had Carol's notarized declaration and Peterson's letter promising to arrive tomorrow. I stopped at Office Depot for a 3-inch binder and divider tabs. Some people might call that overkill. I call it being thorough. Back home, I spread everything across my kitchen table. The same table where Dad taught me that organization isn't just about neatness. It's about telling a story that anyone can follow. Yellow tabs for the ledgers, green for bank statements, Red for the timeline I'd constructed, showing exactly when that miscellaneous disbursement appeared. 2 days after Mark somehow became executor. Each tab a chapter in this story of numbers that didn't add up. I downloaded the county court's filing guidelines for special hearings, printed them out, highlighted key points, made my own checklist. Some might call it obsessive. I call it being prepared. The motion itself took 3 drafts, had to get the language right, professional but clear. No emotion, just facts, dates, amounts, discrepancies that couldn't be explained away by streamlined anything. My phone buzzed around 4 p.m. Email notification, read receipt, notice of special hearing. Mark had opened it. I imagined him in his office, that trademark grin slipping just a fraction. It took exactly 12 minutes for my phone to light up with his call. I watched it ring, remembering that t-shirt, that laughter. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. His voicemail came through while I was fixing dinner. I put it on speaker, letting his voice fill my kitchen. "Hey sis, got your little notice. Look, I know you're detail-oriented. It's what makes you such a great CFO, right?" His chuckle felt like sandpaper. "But come on, dragging the family into court, making a fool of yourself? That's not very sisterly. Call me back. We'll work something out." I played it twice more, transcribed every word. The transcript went behind a blue, tab-labeled tone, because sometimes the way something is said matters as much as what's being said. At my desk, I looked at the calendar. 24 days until probate closed. I circled the date twice in red ink, just like Dad used to circle important deadlines. You know what's funny about midnight? It's both an ending and a beginning. As I locked the binder and slid it into my fireproof safe, the kitchen clock ticked over to 12's fog. Yesterday became today, but the numbers, the real numbers, stayed exactly the same. Dad used to say that good records are like good witnesses. They tell the same story every time you ask them. Looking at that locked safe, I knew the story these records were telling. All I had to do now was make sure the right people heard it. I'd been first in line at the county clerk's office, coffee cooling in my travel mug, manila envelope tucked under my arm. 8 o'clock sharp. Dad's voice in my head reminding me that early means on time means late. The clerk, badge reading Patricia, barely glanced up from her monitor. "Filing for probate court? Special hearing request." I slid the paperwork through the window slot. All tabbed and indexed. You know that sinking feeling when someone flips through your carefully prepared documents and frowns? Patricia's red fingernail tapped against page 6. "Exhibit C isn't properly certified. See here?" She pointed to a blank line where apparently a stamp should have been. "Can't accept it like this." My stomach clenched. The certification had been buried in the filing guidelines footnotes. I'd missed it. "How long to correct it?" I asked, already calculating drive time to the notary. "Window closes at 4. Patricia handed everything back. "E-filing's always an option." Carol Chen squeezed me in, between appointments, but her printer jammed twice before producing the certification. By the time I got back to my car, the dashboard clock read 11:45. I logged into the court's e-portal, uploaded the corrected documents, and clicked submit. The loading circle spun and spun and spun. "Come on," I muttered, jabbing refresh. Error message. Try again. Error message. At 2 o'clock, I was still there, surviving on a granola bar from the vending machine that tasted like sweetened cardboard. 22 days left. The window for stopping Mark was shrinking by the hour. My phone buzzed, a banking app notification. I pulled up my spreadsheet, the one tracking expenses since this started. The cell showing my safety cushion had just dipped below the threshold. Numbers turned red, like they were embarrassed to be so low. I dialed Aunt Linda, needing to hear something besides the voice in my head, saying I was wrong. "Maybe they're right," I said, watching another error message pop up. "The whole family thinks I'm just being difficult, proud, making trouble because Mark made fun of me." Sarah Jane Hawkins. Linda's voice carried the weight of someone who'd known me since diapers. This isn't about pride. This is about stewardship. Your father trusted you with more than just numbers. He trusted you with his legacy. That's a sacred responsibility. The portal finally cooperated around 3:30. I hit submit and held my breath until the confirmation appeared. Just before 5, an email arrived from the court. My hands shook as I opened it. Special hearing scheduled for September 28th at 9 a.m. Relief hit first, then fear. September 28th, 3 days before probate closed. If anything went wrong, there'd be no time to fix it. The drive home felt longer than usual, darkness settling in early as summer faded to fall. At a red light, my phone lit up with notifications. The family group chat was active. I shouldn't have looked. But we all do things we shouldn't sometimes, don't we? Cousin Brenda had posted a photo from the reunion, me in that CFO shirt trying to smile. Someone had added text, "When you think QuickBooks makes you Warren Buffett." 3 laugh reactions, a crying, laughing emoji from Uncle Pete. Mark had responded with a gif of someone dramatically rolling their eyes. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. So many responses came to mind, about integrity, about respect, about the difference between keeping books and cooking them. Instead, I drove home in silence. Parked, carried Dad's ledger inside, and set it on the mantel next to his favorite family photo from my college graduation. "I won't say a word," I told his smiling face in the picture, "until every number tells its story, until every proof is ready." The ledger's leather binding caught the lamplight, solid and real as Dad's handshake had been. You see, some people think silence means surrender, but sometimes silence is just the quiet before truth speaks louder than any joke ever could. The next morning, I spread everything across my dining room table, Dad's ledgers, Mark's slides, and blank poster boards I'd picked up from Office Depot. You know those crime shows where they map everything with red string? That's basically what I was doing, minus the string. I drew neat columns side by side. On the left, Dad's precise handwriting showed deposits, withdrawals, and balances. On the right, I copied Mark's numbers from the reunion slides. Then came the arrows, red ones pointing to gaps where money vanished between Dad's records and Mark's version. "Keep it simple," I muttered, remembering how Dad taught me to explain complex things. "Start with what you know is true, then show what changed." I timed myself explaining each board. On February 12th, Dad recorded this $47,000 transfer. But in Mark's March statement, only $22,000 appears. The difference? A miscellaneous disbursement that somehow processed after Dad's signature date. You ever notice how practicing something alone feels different than saying it to people? My voice kept wanting to shake when I mentioned Mark's name. I'd stop, breathe, and start over. By sunset, my kitchen counter looked like a war room. 3 poster boards with comparison columns, a timeline of signature dates, and printed bank statements with highlighting that made them glow like radioactive paper. My phone buzzed, a group text from Cousin Brenda. "Mark's hosting coffee tomorrow. Says he wants to clear up confusion about the estate. Everyone welcome." Then came Mark's follow-up. A PDF attachment titled, "How Grief Distorts Math, Understanding Emotional Responses to Estate Planning." The preview showed bullet points about natural confusion and family healing. I had to laugh. Classic Mark, turning his defense into a TED Talk. More messages rolled in. So thoughtful. This helps explain everything. Even Aunt Linda's church friend Martha chimed in with a heart emoji. You'd think it would have made me angry, watching him work his charm. Instead, I felt this weird calm. Let him spend his energy playing counselor. I had Dad's actual numbers. That CFO shirt was still hanging in my closet, cleaned and pressed. I'd been planning to burn it after this was over, but standing there folding my court outfit, I had a better idea. I laid it out next to my charcoal blazer. Sometimes the best way to take power from a joke is to own it completely. The alarm went off at 6 on hearing day. I didn't need it. I'd been awake since 4, watching shadows crawl across my ceiling. By 8, I'd triple-checked the binder, straightened my blazer, and put on that CFO shirt like armor. I snapped a photo of my kitchen clock at 8:30. Evidence of time, Dad would have said. Everything needs a timestamp. The canvas bag he'd used for Rotary Club meetings held his ledgers perfectly. I ran my fingers over the worn handles, remembering how he'd carry it every Thursday night, ready to report on fundraising totals. The courthouse metal detector buzzed when I walked through. The security guard waved her wand over my binder clips. "Business or family court?" she asked, handing back my bag. "Both, actually." She nodded like she'd heard that combination before. Mark was already there, posted by the courtroom door like a host at his coffee chat. His smile widened when he saw the shirt. "Embracing your role, sis? Good sport." I met his eyes but didn't speak. "Save your words for the judge," Dad's voice whispered in my memory. The courtroom smelled like lemon polish and old wood. I took my place in the front row, setting Dad's ledgers on the table. The canvas bag went under my chair, where I could feel its presence against my ankle. "All rise," the bailiff called. "Special hearing in the matter of the Hawkins estate, Judge Reynolds presiding." I stood, feeling the weight of the shirt against my shoulders. No longer a joke, but a declaration. I knew these numbers. I'd lived these numbers. And numbers, unlike brothers, don't lie. "State your name for the record," Judge Reynolds said, peering over reading glasses. "Sarah Hawkins, Your Honor." The microphone caught a slight tremor in my voice, but I steadied it. "I request leave to present original documents." You know that moment when everything you've prepared for suddenly feels real? That was it. My hands touching Dad's leather ledger, the familiar grain steadying my nerves. "These are my father's accounting books," I said, opening to January. He maintained them alongside digital records for over 30 years. Each entry shows date, amount, and purpose. I traced the neat columns with my finger, remembering Dad's lectures about clean audit trails. The judge leaned forward. "Proceed, Ms. Hawkins." I walked them through January's story. Pension deposits, utility payments, charitable donations, each one dated and initialed. No vague categories, no miscellaneous catches, just crystal clear purpose for every dollar. "Now, Your Honor, I'd like to compare this with the estate presentation." I placed Mark's slide 6 next to Dad's ledger. Notice, the January 15th entry in Dad's book shows a $12,500 transfer to the family trust. But in my brother's version, that same date shows only $8,300, with the difference listed as miscellaneous disbursement. The fluorescent lights hummed in the silence as I laid out 3 more examples. Each time, Dad's precise numbers danced away from Mark's totals, leaving gaps that whispered of clever editing. "To verify authenticity," I continued, "I have letters from the church archivist who maintained records of Dad's Rotary Club treasurer work, confirming his handwriting." I presented the notarized documents, along with a timeline showing when signatures appeared on estate papers. Mark's lawyer, some Brooks Brothers suit from downtown, stood up smoothly. "Your Honor, while these homemade ledgers may hold sentimental value, they're hardly reliable evidence compared to modern financial records. We're dealing with grief-driven—" "If it pleases the court," I cut in, "I request a brief recess for forensic comparison of the signatures. A qualified analyst could verify authenticity." Judge Reynolds studied both tables, then nodded. "Court will temporarily recess while we consult the forensic department. Bailiff, please escort Ms. Hawkins and counsel to Analysis Room C." The analyst was a woman about my age, with reading glasses on a chain. She clicked through magnified images of Dad's signatures. The ones I knew were real against the ones that made my stomach turn. "Observe the pressure points," she murmured, tracing lines with her cursor. "Natural signatures show varying density where the writer pauses or speeds up. See how this H flows into the A. Now compare it to the executor documents." The screen filled with overlapping specimens. Real signatures danced with natural variation. The questionable ones marched in suspicious similarity, like photocopies trying to pass for originals. Across the room, Mark kept his politician's smile, but his left hand tapped his armrest. Some tells never change. He'd done that same nervous tap when Mom caught him forging sick notes in high school. Remember when I said numbers don't lie? Neither do habits, if you know where to look. The bailiff appeared at the door. Judge Reynolds will resume in 15 minutes. I gathered Dad's ledger, feeling its honest weight. Mark's lawyer huddled with him in the corner, their whispers sharp as card players with bad hands. Standing by the window, I traced the embossed year on the ledger's spine. 15 minutes to learn if all those nights checking numbers, all those careful photographs of documents, would finally bring the truth to light. My reflection in the glass caught the CFO letters across my chest. For the first time since the reunion, they didn't sting. Maybe Mark thought that shirt would shame me into silence. Instead, it had become a badge, proof that I was exactly who Dad trusted me to be, someone who could read between the lines and stand up for what was right. The analyst gathered her printouts. Mark paced by the door. And I waited, Dad's ledger close, for the bailiff to call us back. The water from the hallway fountain tasted like pennies, but it helped steady my hands. When I slipped back into the courtroom, the analyst was already speaking, her glasses catching the overhead lights. Based on microscopic analysis and comparative pressure mapping, she said, gesturing to the projected signatures, these executor documents show clear signs of simulation. The natural variation present in verified samples is absent. Additionally, she clicked to a new slide. The questioned signatures demonstrate pen lifts and hesitation marks consistent with traced forgery. You know that moment when you've double-checked your math 3 times and the answer finally proves you right? That's how it felt, watching the truth surface in crystal-clear pixels. Judge Reynolds turned to Mark. And the ledger authenticity? The ink dating corresponds precisely with the entry dates, the analyst confirmed. Chemical analysis shows consistent aging patterns throughout the book. These are contemporaneous records, Your Honor, maintained in real time. I remembered Dad at his desk, carefully logging each transaction while teaching me about audit trails. Always date it when it happens, Sarah, he'd say. Memory plays tricks, but ink tells the truth. The judge adjusted his glasses, studying the exhibits. Mr. Hawkins, please explain the miscellaneous disbursement of $4,200 on January 15th. Mark stood, straightening his tie. Of course, Your Honor. As executor, I had pre-probate expenses to manage. Legal consultations, property assessments. He waved his hand vaguely. Standard administrative costs. I have documentation from First National, I cut in, pulling out the blue-tabbed section. No such authorized withdrawal exists for that date. I've included the bank's confirmation letter. The gallery rustled behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know the expression shifting on familiar faces. Cousin Brenda's camera stayed silent for once. Uncle Ron's usual throat clearing grew louder, his tell when he's uncomfortable. Furthermore, I continued, Dad's ledger shows the full amount transferred to the family trust, with no provision for pre-probate expenses. The trust agreement, which I've included, as Exhibit D, requires 2-party authorization for any withdrawal over $500. My fingers found the raised letters on my shirt. CFO. The cotton had softened after so many washes, but the message felt stronger than ever. Chief Financial Officer. The title Mark meant as a joke had become a shield. Judge Reynolds gathered the exhibits, his movements deliberate. I'll need to review these materials thoroughly, given the complexity of the evidence and the probate deadline. I will issue my ruling first thing tomorrow morning. He checked his watch. Court will reconvene at 9 a.m. The gavel crack echoed as I packed my binder. 3 days left before probate closed. Every hour counted now. Mark brushed past my chair, his cologne too sharp in the stuffy courtroom. Families forgive, sis, he murmured. Remember that. The same words he'd used after borrowing my car in high school and returning it with an empty tank. After borrowing my credit card number for emergency concert tickets. After every small betrayal that built to this moment, I stepped into the corridor, checking my phone's calendar. 72 hours until the probate deadline. The courthouse lights had shifted to that late afternoon gold that always reminded me of Dad's study. Aunt Linda appeared at my elbow, steady as always. Need help carrying and anything? Just the truth, I said, hugging Dad's ledger closer. That's heavy enough. We walked toward the parking lot, my sensible flats clicking against marble. Every step felt like another number being balanced, another column reaching its proper sum. I had 3 days to see this through, and like Dad taught me, I'd use every minute to get the math right. 9 a.m. sharp, and the courtroom felt different. Maybe it was the morning light, streaming through those tall windows, or maybe it was knowing that numbers don't lie, they just wait to be discovered. I stood at the counsel table, hands steady on my father's ledger, as Judge Reynolds settled into his chair. Having reviewed the extensive documentation presented, he began, adjusting his reading glasses. This court finds compelling evidence of financial irregularities in the administration of the Hawkins estate. You could have heard a pencil drop. I focused on my breathing, the way Dad taught me during tax season when the columns got too long. In, out. Let the numbers speak. The authenticated ledgers maintained by the deceased demonstrate meticulous record-keeping and clear intent regarding asset distribution. Judge Reynolds looked up, his gaze sharp. Mr. Hawkins, your position as executor was obtained through documents bearing questioned signatures, now proven fraudulent by forensic analysis. Mark shifted in his chair, his lawyer's hand on his arm. Gone was yesterday's easy smile, replaced by something tighter, smaller. Furthermore, the judge continued, the unauthorized withdrawal of $4,200 represents a serious breach of fiduciary duty. This court hereby removes Mark Hawkins as executor, effective immediately. A collective intake of breath behind me, the kind of sound you hear when someone's carefully built image cracks right down the middle. I didn't turn around. Some moments deserve your full attention. Restitution of the misappropriated funds, plus statutory interest, is ordered within 30 days. Judge Reynolds shuffled his papers. Ms. Sarah Hawkins, are you willing to serve as interim personal representative until a neutral fiduciary can be appointed? Yes, Your Honor. My voice came out clear and quiet, like Dad's numbers in his ledger. The next few minutes blurred into signatures and clerk stamps. I remember the scratch of the pen as I accepted the interim role, the weight of responsibility settling familiar on my shoulders. When I looked up, Mark was moving through the gallery, reaching for Brenda like he always did when he needed allies. But Brenda turned away, her camera nowhere in sight. Uncle Ron suddenly needed to check his phone. The family's shift felt like watching dominoes fall in slow motion, not with a crash, but with the quiet certainty of gravity doing its work. Mark tried his usual recovery smile. Hey, come on, guys. It's still me. But charm doesn't work when the math doesn't add up. Even his golf buddies found somewhere else to look. Outside, under that big bronze courthouse seal, I opened my canvas bag. Dad's ledger sat there, solid and sure as the day Aunt Linda delivered it. I ran my fingers over the worn leather, feeling the slight bumps where his pen had pressed through paper, marking truth in permanent ink. Remember how I said every number tells a story? Well, here's one. 2 weeks later, I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd spread out all those bank statements, and opened my laptop to kitchen renovation websites. Nothing fancy, just the updates I'd been putting off. The kind of practical improvement Dad would have appreciated. Good light matters in a kitchen, he used to say while helping Mom with the dishes. That's where families tell their truths. So I started with the lighting. Warm LEDs that would make the space feel both modern and welcoming. The kind of light that would show every detail clearly, just like Dad's ledgers did. That evening, I sorted through my closet and found the CFO shirt, now soft with washing. I held it up, remembering the sting of that first reveal, how laughter can mask deeper intentions. With steady hands, I cut out just the letters, CFO, and dropped the rest in my donation box. The frame I ordered for Dad's ledger page arrived the next day. Simple wood, nothing flashy, but solid. I chose the February page where he'd written about setting aside funds for my future stability. His handwriting flowed across the lines, each number placed just so, telling its own kind of love story. Those 3 letters from the shirt? I tucked them into the frame's corner, behind the mat. Not everyone needs to see them, but I know they're there. Sometimes the best victories are the quiet ones, measured in balanced books and restored trust rather than loud declarations. 3 weeks after the hearing, morning sun streamed through my kitchen's new windows, catching the edge of freshly installed quartz countertops. I'd chosen a warm cream color that reminded me of Dad's favorite coffee mug, practical but welcoming, just like him. The renovation hadn't been extravagant, but every change felt right, like putting something broken back into proper alignment. The doorbell chimed. A courier stood on my porch with a long, flat package, the custom frame I'd ordered for Dad's ledger page. I signed for it, remembering another signature that had started this whole journey, and carried the package to my desk in the breakfast nook. The frame was exactly what I'd hoped for. Solid oak with clean lines, nothing flashy, just like Dad's accounting style. I carefully lifted the January ledger page, the one that showed his meticulous year-opening totals. Each number stood in perfect formation, his handwriting steady and sure. No miscellaneous entries here. Every penny accounted for, every column balanced. My laptop pinged with a new email. The court-appointed fiduciary had sent confirmation of Mark's restitution transfer, right down to the statutory interest. I created a new folder labeled Stewardship and filed the receipt there, then sat back and let out a long breath. The family group chat notification flashed on my phone. I scrolled past messages from people who'd once laughed at Mark's CFO joke. Now they traded awkward apologies or maintained telling silence. Cousin Brenda, who'd snapped those photos of me in the shirt, had sent a private message. I should have looked closer. I marked it read, but didn't reply. Some lessons need time to sink in. From my desk drawer, I pulled out the carefully trimmed letters, CFO, that I'd saved from that shirt. Funny how something meant to diminish could become a private badge of victory. I placed them in a small box labeled Keepsakes, next to Dad's old calculator and the thank you note Aunt Linda had sent after the hearing. Speaking of Aunt Linda, I owed her more than I could ever say. That box of ledgers she'd delivered had changed everything. Trust the ink, she'd said, and she'd been right. I picked up my phone and typed out a message. The ledger's getting framed today. Thank you for seeing what needed to be seen. The court's final order sat on my desk, crisp and official. I slid it into the last tab of my evidence binder, the period at the end of a long sentence. As I closed the binder, I caught my reflection in the window. Shoulders straight, head high, the morning light making everything clear. Standing on my stepladder, I positioned Dad's framed ledger page above my desk. The glass caught the sunlight, making his steady columns glow. My eyes traced his familiar loops and swirls, each number a testament to the quiet power of doing things right. This spot, this moment, it felt like crossing a finish line and a starting line all at once. The kitchen hummed with possibility. New light fixtures cast warm pools on the countertops where I'd spread those first suspicious bank statements. The air smelled of fresh paint and coffee, not worry and late nights. I stepped back and looked at everything. The ledger watching over my workspace, the organized files in my cabinet, the binder that held a story of justice served without a single raised voice. Numbers and truth had done all the shouting necessary. My fingertips brushed across the frame's edge as I whispered to Dad's handwriting. Respect isn't given. It's earned through fire.